how much institutional or even retail interest is this going to bring into the crypto world? Is it going to be an important milestone?
Great to be here, Matt. Thanks very much for having me. And I think you just hit that is the key question, is not so much the date, it's not so much when exactly that ETFs will launch, it's what will the impact be. And I think that you really touched on it right at the top of the show with the correlation chart, because that is really the key. That is the key reason for allocation to Bitcoin. I think for most investors, it is that Markovitzian free lunch that Bitcoin provides because of its diversificationary effects, because it has over the long run been uncorrelated to most of the major asset classes, very low correlation exhibited over the past 10 years. There have been periods where that correlation has gone up, as you rightly mentioned, in that pandemic era. But this year, for most of this year, the correlation has indeed been negative. If there has been any correlation at all. So that diversificationary effect that it can give and imbue to portfolios of stocks, bonds, cash, and alternatives is what's going to drive the conversation. That's what's going to drive the inflows. The question is, what is that allocation? Because the quantitative evidence, the empirical evidence tells us it shouldn't be zero.
It shouldn't be zero, but I've heard often in conversations, Sui, about this idea that really at this point you shouldn't be putting anything into crypto that you're not willing to use, and that would maybe suggest that it shouldn't be super heavily weighted in a portfolio in terms of that asset allocation breakup. It also, we have to keep in mind, comes against a backdrop of there been a lot of anticipation, to your point, about a spot ETF being approved eventually. Maybe it's a question of when, not a question of if, and I just wonder how much of that anticipation already is baked into what we're seeing in prices, and if ultimately what we see is, okay, maybe a little bit more institutional attraction, a little bit more volume in terms of flows, but pricing doesn't change that much. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I think people have been talking about, it's baked into the price, that authorization approval is baked into the price. And indeed, the approval may be baked into the price. But as you rightly point out, it's not so much the approval, it's how much inflow are these products, if they are approved, when they are approved, how much inflow will they see? That, what is the market pricing in? Is the market pricing in $5 billion of inflow, or is it pricing in $10 billion of inflow? We don't really know. And so I think that most investors will look at this cautiously. I don't think any institutional investors are going to be thinking about timing the market, timing a bump. What most institutional investors will be looking at is over the long term and the diversificationary effects that Bitcoin can have in their portfolios and add more resilience to the returns that they will see from their portfolios.